An AI for innovation. Would it benefit us all? Michelle Chivunga, founder, CEO, investor of Global Policy House and an AFCFTA digital trade expert in emerging tech, data and artificial intelligence. She's a globally recognized digital transformation expert with vast knowledge of cutting-edge emerging technologies with a focus on artificial intelligence, blockchain and data, working with global fintech ecosystems, governments, regulators and central banks. Mapula Budibe is Chief Executive Officer at MTN Rwanda South. She's a seasoned telecom specialist with 17 years experience. During her career with MTN, she has served in various leadership roles, including the Chief Marketing Officer at MTN Uganda, as well as the Executive and General Manager for the Consumer Business Unit at MTN South Africa. Zandile Mkwanazi, founder and CEO of Girl Code. Zandile is a trailblazing entrepreneur and advocate for women in tech. As the founder and CEO of Girl Code, a leading organization empowering women through technology, she has impacted the lives of over 80,000 girls and women, with a proven track record of success in both education and entrepreneurship. Zandile is a driving force in the South African tech ecosystem. Kemi Adiosun, former Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy of Nigeria. She assumed the role of Nigeria's Minister of Finance under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari in 2015, implementing targeted fiscal spending and the whistleblower policy. After her resignation, she continued making significant positive contributions to humanity. She established the Dash Me Foundation in 2021 to assist disadvantaged individuals. The moderator is Fifi Peters, senior anchor at CNBC Africa.
Okay, so let's get to discussing. I don't know how many of you would have picked up the pun in the theme of this discussion. Yes, it's an AI for innovation. Would it benefit us all? But it can also be flipped as an I for innovation. And that, of course, speaks to the mastery of words of the writers and the editor at Forbes, Women Africa. So I actually just want to ask the audience a quick question, because I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. We all get told that, in fact, we talk about AI. A lot of us talk about AI within our industries all of the time, most of the time. But I'm curious as to how much of us, or how many of us actually use AI on a daily basis within our work. I can see you, the lights are quite bright, so just by a show of hands, how frequently, how much of you are frequent users of AI in the room?
Okay.
Brilliant. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. And I say, oh, wow. Oh, a shout out to the team there at McDonald's. We see you. I'm wondering how the AI filters into the coffee that you're giving out. But I say, oh, wow, because I wonder if you would have observed that the room is pretty split. It's kind of 50-50. Maybe if we're being fair, it's 55% who use AI, maybe 45% who don't. And I think that let's start the conversation by unpacking that, because we're talking about whether this innovation that is happening in this ecosystem will benefit us all. And Michelle, I want to talk to you first, because you're essentially a lady who, this is your home ground, as it were, digital transformation, blockchains. You work a lot with individuals in the private sector in many parts of the world. You work a lot with advisors in governments from Bermuda. Didn't know how that happened, but Bermuda to Africa, you're advising. She's even advising proponents of the G20 and B20 as well. In terms of the numbers that you did see in the room regarding the usage of AI, what do you think about that? And do you reckon it's a good or bad thing?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's good morning, everybody. It's fantastic to be here. I think AI, in terms of the numbers we're seeing, of course, the response from the room as well was really quite impressive, because I think, we always talk about AI almost kind of as an abstract, but what we're seeing actually, AI is moving at a rapid pace globally around the world. Every single country around the world is really adopting artificial intelligence. So those numbers are kind of accurate, but I think what you're going to see as we move forward is that those those numbers will actually kind of double up and triple up as we move forward. And certainly, I think on the African continent as well, what we are seeing is actually a big momentum by especially the youth to start to adopt AI models and create AI models, which is pretty phenomenal. And when you move around the world, like you were saying, you know, I was at the Trump administration's inauguration just recently. Again, the big topic there is how do we leverage things like artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency. And never have I heard in my almost kind of 12-year career now in AI and blockchain, have I seen that momentum, right? You know, almost every single country really is thinking about how do we use AI, not necessarily just to build models, but how do you use AI even for economic development and growth within the countries. So we are moving beyond just the application of AI using, for different sectors. Even economies and governments are now starting to think about, okay, how do we develop a continent-wide AI structure, right, that we can leverage for growth, we can leverage to support young people develop new skills, and certainly, of course, in terms of economic and empowerment as well, is something that we're seeing quite strongly. Yeah.
Sure, and I'm glad that you did mention the Trump administration, because right now, I don't know how many of you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed in keeping up with a lot of the headlines that are coming out of the White House of late. But I think that the only thing that's keeping up with the headlines coming out of the White House of late is the innovation that we are seeing in AI space. As you mentioned, things are moving very rapidly in the space. And I suppose maybe, Michelle, just one last question around maybe speaking more specifically to the trends that are unfolding. What should we be knowing, just based on what you are seeing out there as an African continent?
Yeah, no. It's very clear. I think a lot of countries. Saudi Arabia has invested something like sort of $600 billion. The US, again, is looking at hundreds and hundreds of billions investment into artificial intelligence. And the reason these countries are doing that is because we know that for a fact that AI is going to play a major transformative role for economies in general. So in terms of what we really should be focusing on, especially on the continent, is that we have a youthful continent, right? We have a very young continent, and most of these young people need to be able to have the skill set, right, to be able to be competitive and leverage that globally. So for me, what I'd really love to see is a bit more, skills development for young people, especially around AI, skills development for women. I think it's particularly important for ourselves. We've also launched a 10 million women initiative to train 10 million women into AI, because we know that is the future. So I think the skills development investment, as in actual investment into AI, is fundamental, but that AI application has to mean something. So we're not going to use AI just for the fun of it. We need to be able to develop AI models that address things like healthcare, diagnosis, support education, support agri-tech, value chains. That's where we want to be able to apply the AI models. And AI is very much powered by data. If we don't have data, then it's very difficult for us to build really concrete models. So I think in Africa we have a lot of data, but we need that data to be digitized. So our governments hold a lot of data, but it's not digitized. So we need to take it step by step. Right? And when we're using AI, we need to understand, why are we using AI? Is it actually addressing a real problem, a real issue on the continent? If not, then let's be careful about how we use AI. It has its dangers as well. We don't want biases. Again, it's back to the data, right? In terms of the data that you're using, be very careful in terms of what you're using to develop your models.
So hopefully we'll get the time to talk about maybe some of the risk areas and concern areas when it does come to AI. Zandile, I can see that you're nodding and smiling as Michelle is talking about skills development and coding and data. I'm going to get to you in terms of the work that you're doing in that space, but I just want to stick in the lane of the trends that are unfolding right now. And Mapule, naturally, that leads me to you. You are the CEO of, or you're part of one of, in fact, the largest telecoms operator on the continent as MTN. So if there's anything that's happening with AI, I imagine that this is certainly conversations that you are having in your boardroom. And maybe you can just tell us about those conversations. I mean, as this big telecoms operator, how are you approaching the innovations in AI? And of course, when we talk about AI right now, I think that most of us relate more specifically with generative AI, I'm told, and put simply in English, ChatGPT, or maybe even DeepSeek. Some of you have started using that latest invention that has come onto the global stage. But AI, telecoms operator on the continent, talk to us about what you're seeing.
No, thanks, Fifi. Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I think certainly, spoken from a telecoms perspective, AI presents a vast opportunity for us. For some of you, you might know that MTN celebrated 30 years of operation last year. Now, why is that important? The first 30 years of MTN was really about creating the foundation for connectivity. which has pretty much become hygiene. Now, in terms of how we're approaching AI, it's about how do we use AI to unlock value for the next 30 years, because the hygiene factors such as making sure that the network is operational, making sure that customers have a SIM card, those things are now basic, but it's about how do we use the data that we have, and we have vast amount of data. You know, she spoke about data earlier. How do we maximize value from that data from 3 aspects? I think the first one is, because we have so many customers with that data, it's very important that we use that data to make it meaningful to them. Why is that important? Because with the data that you have, with AI, we are able to personalize experiences. I think one of the fascinating use cases for AI for our business is how, using the vast amount of data, you can actually customize a user journey to suit a specific customer. Personalizing interactions. When somebody picks up the call at the call center, they greet you by name. They are able to anticipate what you're going to talk about because they've seen a pattern. You might have been affected by the network. You might have had a disturbance in terms of your experience. So those kind of things. So the biggest effort we are putting into the AI focus is really how do we use it to digitize customer experiences, but also maximize value by personalizing everyone's experience. And that's possible with AI because of just the processing power that it has in terms of the data. The second one is really about, of course, we are a technology company. Our basic fundamental is making sure that customers are connected to the network. Now, what does AI do for us there? I think in terms of when you look at the continent, we still have areas where we still have to get connectivity right. But where we have connectivity already established, it's really about how are we able to predict, being able to predict population growth and therefore anticipate where we are going to set up sort of that connectivity demand. But also being able to anticipate, looking at weather patterns. One of the great use cases we've started piloting now is about how we look at weather patterns and how they're going to affect our network experience. And before an experience gets interrupted, you actually are able to warn the customer to say they can expect some interruptions at this time and this time. And customers value that because we are able to really, personalize the journey for them. And then I think the third one is really about productivity. I think it's also quite exciting because we are a big company, productivity is quite important. And what AI does for us, it's able to help us to simplify the mundane tasks, We need to be focused on innovation, creativity, so that we are not analyzing lots of data. What the data that we have, once analyzed using AI tools, we are able to then make decisions. Also, from a scenario modeling perspective, we have lots of decisions to make at any point in time, but we don't always have the opportunity to pilot, test case and so forth. But AI allows us to model examples of what could happen. And then before we actually go out into the market with something, we've already tested it. We are able to anticipate.
All right.
So, really data-driven decision-making.
All right, okay. Circling back to what you said, Mapule, in terms of connectivity, you said if we get connectivity right. And I'd like to ask, are we getting connectivity right? I mean, the 3G, 4G, 5G, it's going to need a lot of data, it's going to need a lot of infrastructure, it's going to need a whole lot coming from telecoms operator, I'm sure government officials as well, to get the connectivity right. Just talk to us about where we are there as the MTN group and what perhaps more you need to get that plug-in correct.
No, that's a very important question. I think traditionally, we used to roll out connectivity, where there was a population, we would roll out. Very simple equation. But what's happened now is that, and this is where AI comes in, because we are able to use AI, which actually has intelligence to predict the kind of data or other utilization that's going to be needed. As an example, we are not just applying, connectivity for connectivity's sake. We are able to be more bespoke in terms of the connectivity that we need to get there. As an example, if we have a suburb where we see that there's predominantly 5G devices, so in terms of how we drive connectivity, you prioritize that versus going the traditional route.
Sure.
And also in terms of using government data, if we understand the population statistics and we are able to look at sort of in terms of town planning, we are able to pre-plan on how we are able to then roll out in a much more intelligent way. It's also more efficient because you don't wait for population, you don't roll out and wait for the population to come. You actually are able to predict when, populations are going to be spreading, and you are able to then roll out. So I think, the benefit that it's given us is that it made us more intelligent, made us more predictive, and made us more efficient in terms of how we are driving connectivity,
Sure.
especially now in the day of 5G, because we need to be able to make sure that it's relevant and it's actually meaningful for the people that are going to be accessing it.
Right. I talk about 5G specifically because, of course, we are going to need the fastest kind of data and the most seamless kind of connectivity to really leverage the benefits that artificial intelligence can bring us. Both of you spoke about productivity, efficiency, and just more competitiveness as a continent. Minister Adishun, I want to come to you, ma'am, because just riding back off what Mapule was talking about, just alluding to some of the areas in infrastructure. Michelle's talking about some of the billions that are being spent in other parts of the world. I mean, we have billions on the continent as well, but we also have other pressing needs. I mean, we've got health, we've got education that we still need to catch up on, and a whole lot of inequality and poverty gaps that we still need to close. What is your thinking of how the public sector in the continent is approaching AI? I mean, are we rising to the mark as quickly as we should? I mean, you are a global citizen with that. And also, just given the pressing spending challenges and the competing interests that budgets on the continent have, just what's your thoughts on how best to maneuver?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think, as you've said correctly, there are so many competing needs in Africa for capital. We are capital hungry as a continent, and I think we have to accept that. We can't outspend the Saudis, we can't outspend the Americans. However, human capital, young, bright human capital, is a big driver of AI. It's a big driver of the utilization of the opportunity. And I think that's where Africa is strong. So I think what we've got to think about is being very efficient in how we create the enabling environment for the use and the adaptation of AI. We can create hubs, we can create clusters. I'm a great believer in government not trying to boil the ocean. I think sometimes Africa, we just make very broad, we need to develop type comments rather than being very specific. So taking it down to state level, taking it down to school level, taking it down to university level, and building that infrastructure in clusters and allowing our young people to access it. Because the potential for AI to allow our young people to leapfrog, if they have the coding skills, they can compete on the global, in the global market from wherever they are in the world. And we should not, as government, deprive them of that opportunity. We do need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place, but in a sustainable way, not in a way where we make a huge announcement which we cannot fund and therefore won't happen. I think the second word for government around AI is partnership, recognizing that we can crowd in the private sector, we can look for funding from the NTNs, from the subnational governments, from the private sector, from the voluntary sector, who want to support this. So I think government will have to be a little bit humble, and it's not easy for government to be humble, a little bit humble.
From experience?
yeah, governments are not humble. Recognizing what we have, recognizing what we don't have, and where necessary, borrowing brilliance. I'm a great believer, and regulation is another problem. So we talk about some of the harms of AI. Government's job will be to regulate. It's really important for the AI community to reach out to government and make sure there's information, because when government don't understand things, they tend to act with a sledgehammer to crack the nut, and we ban. We've seen it happen with crypto, and it wasn't that they wanted to ban it, it was that really they didn't understand it. So I think if government can be humble enough to say we don't understand it, ask the young people who do to help them, ask the young people to partner with them on regulation rather than using a big stick, I think then Africa can really take advantage of it. Because the last thing we want is to have our young people's arms tied behind their backs at a time when the whole global economy is moving forward.
So regulation, important obviously to govern some market dynamics, but regulation in the technology industry also sometimes it's seen as caution, and it's also seen or perceived as stifling innovation. So you're saying, in terms of the balance of the efficacy of the regulatory tool, it's consulting and collaborating with the private sector.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even America, I think in the last few weeks, we've just had this flip-flop from sort of Biden's administration saying we're going to regulate this and Trump throwing all the regulations out of the window. You can't have no regulation because then it's the wild, wild west. It's you know, it becomes very dangerous. And AI can be dangerous. We've all seen those examples. But if you partner, rather than wait for the problem and then try and legislate, then you have a better chance of achieving something. And as the speed of change is so fast in AI that no government can keep up with it.
Sure.
So the best thing to do is to stick with the people that are moving and try and influence from that end, from a partnership.
Sure. All right. So Zandile, I will. You want?
Thank you.
Okay. Closing us off, you are on a mission to empower 10 million young girls. Youth is relative because some of us are still young. To learn how to code by 2030.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah, so it's a journey, right? It's a bit challenging, and just echoing everybody's sentiments. There's a lot to do in the space, especially now with AI. There's a lot of opportunities, but infrastructure is still a huge barrier for young people. When we're talking, I saw like a lot of people here use AI, and I'm assuming it's Gen AI, right? ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is. Young people in townships and rural areas still are not exposed to that. Right, so there's still a lot of work to be done, and for us, we are saying that if we are now in this fourth industrial revolution, we need to make sure that young girls and women are not left behind. So rather than just talking about the opportunities, we take it to the communities and we show them how to use the tools. We give them the resources to say, this is what you can do with it. And the opportunities are endless, right? We've seen young women that have never been exposed to computers are now building solutions for their schools. They're building websites. They're getting jobs overseas. We have some of our girls that now live in London, actually in the UK. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the space, and as Gold Code, we've made sure that we are at the forefront of that we are going into the communities and we are giving them the skills.
Sure.
And then from then on, making sure that they can utilize their skills to leapfrog their own lives and get out of poverty. Yeah.
Sure. And let's talk about those communities, because there's a lot of young women in this room. You know, we're still young, even with the bags under our eyes or a little bit of jelly on our thighs. We're still young. And who are mothers, though, and who've got children? I was actually listening to a conversation on the way home, and there was a debate around whether buying a tablet for your child at the age of 3 is too soon, and whether that's seen as reckless parenting or parenting that's keeping up with the times. So to the ladies in the room who are hearing conversations around AI, needing to, you know, be competitive, keep up, and making sure that you're ahead of the curve. Can you just address when is the right time to bring their children to your AI school?
No, that's an interesting one, because I also have a 1-year-old daughter, and she's using my laptop.
How old is your daughter?
She's 1 year.
Is she coding at 1?
1.
Ah.
Yeah, and she's using my laptop. She knows what to do now, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like what do you do? How do you know to use a laptop at 1? Because I never taught her. So the reality is that our children are growing up in this digital age, and so they're adapting very fast. So it doesn't benefit us to hold them up, right? So it's never too young to start. As much as we want to protect them, it's more about putting together measures to make sure that they're using it in the right way and that there's safety involved in them being online and who they interact with. But it's never too young and it's never too old. You know, even for someone who's a bit older, you can always learn a new skill. So we continuously have to upskill ourselves and make sure that as Africans, we make sure that we know the skills so that we can leapfrog our own continent. Yeah.
A perfect pointer to end the discussion that has essentially set the tone on AI and just what you as stakeholders in the industry are seeing and what you are doing. And I think that the reason why it was so important for the tone to be set right now is that the next conversation that will be focused on technology and some of the things happening in AI will be speaking directly to women businesses who are using it as a pathway potentially for new success. But I would like to ask you to thank my absolutely fabulous panelists, the minds that have have shared their insights in a very, very important sector that, of course, we all have to be keeping abreast with, even though we do struggle to keep up with what's happening in the White House right now. Thank you.